So, hi. I just wanted to have a quick chat actually about another live stream I did on somebody else's channel the other day. It was on Christmas Eve, and this one was about it's an open mic, veganism, politics, and intersectionality. And I wasn't planning to join, but then I kind of heard the way that people were talking, and when you just think, actually, I've got to speak up here. I just thought, actually, I've got to speak up. So I joined the live stream. The link will be below. It was Michelle Lowe's channel. So what basically happened was that I was putting the position of anti-oppression. I don't really talk about intersectionality. I talk about anti-oppression and structural oppression, and that's the way that I frame it. But what I hadn't realised was that the other 5 people on that stream were all basically like anti-so-called intersectionists. And so they basically didn't buy into the concept of structural oppression, apart from human supremacy, which they did seem to buy into. But any other kind of oppressions, they definitely didn't see the structural side. And I know that because I spent basically the best part of 2.5 hours trying to go through it, drawing analogies, which people in the comments could see as accurate, but nobody on the panel could do. So these people included a female Trump supporter, a vegan YouTuber who makes his living by quote unquote selling gay pornography, although he's not gay, and that somebody in the comments said meant dick pics. And a couple of other people. So it all became very intense. At the end of it, I felt it was a learning, growing experience. I was at a certain point, I thought, well, let's just stick with this, when I realized they were all basically ganging up on me. But, let's just see where it all ends up, because it was a new thing for me. And as an investigative journalist, I mean, my background is investigative journalism. I've done stories from Asia, where I've stayed in Thai hill tribe villages, where there are gangs of agents who try and get children from their parents for sexual purposes, sexual trafficking. I've done stories from India about female infanticide, killing girl babies. I've done stories from Bangladesh about from refugee camps, Rohingya refugees, and maternal health. So it's not like I'm a shrinking violet. At the end of that 2.5 hours, as I said, it was an interesting experience. And I didn't actually see it as bullying until friends were starting to say they watched it and they're like, well, they were laughing at you. And it was bullying. So I started to think, I'm not sure about that. Anyway, it's Christmas Eve, got other things to do, have a good Christmas, tra-la-la-la. But then I saw a response video by Michelle talking about how it was all, basically she didn't see it as bullying. And, it was because I was getting flustered because I wasn't used to live streaming. Well, as I said, I've done live radio, sort of like national radio, local radio. My background isn't exactly a shrinking violet. And that just kind of pushed a few buttons for me. And then I started to think, well, this is kind of quite confusing, really, because, Michelle is a psychologist, which is great. And surely as part of the psychologist kind of, you have code of conduct, don't you? And presumably a psychologist is pretty aware of things like bullying. So that was also somewhat confusing. And then I saw her trotting out a similar line. Well, no, then I saw her being interviewed by Roger Yates. The next day, it was like a running series of stuff happening, which is one of the reasons I thought I'll do this, because it's like, well, why don't I just join in, So Roger Yates was interviewing her on a one-to-one, very respectful way about alt-right and veganism. And I noticed that, at certain times she was like really digging deep. There were long pauses. She was thinking about it, sort of maybe squirming around a bit. And I thought, and that was a 15-minute, very respectful one-to-one interview. And I thought, well, that's interesting. This is an experienced YouTuber. And that's when I start to think, well, what is really going on? Because these are issues that we need to somehow resolve within the vegan community or not community, whatever's going on. And it seems to be attempting to become ever more fragmented because we simply can't get our heads around this sort of notion of structural oppression. Structural oppression just doesn't seem to exist in most people's minds. Although, as I said, it's valid for human supremacy and speciesism. Yeah, we vegans can definitely get that one. But the concept that we may be structurally racist, structurally sexist, structurally homophobic, not because we choose to, but because we've been brought up in a propaganda cloud since we were, babies, to believe these things. And it's only with a degree of consciousness and work that we can even recognize it and then start to challenge it. And that challenging doesn't happen on a one-off basis. It happens on an ongoing basis. And this seems to be territory where no vegans are going to go. It's not about wearing a hair shirt. It's about, well, let's just get real and see how our own sexism, racism, human supremacism, etc., impacts on our campaigning, both within the vegan space and within the non-vegan space, which doesn't seem to be a sort of like a radical or controversial thing to say. Well, that's where I'm wrong, clearly. So I just thought, as I said, I wanted to not set the record straight, but I just thought, well, everybody else is sort of like hopping in there. So I'm going to hop in with my version of it. And it was a learning experience. And sometimes the best learning experiences are quite challenging. So I'm happy it happened. I think there are other ways that could have been more productive. I've learned an awful lot from that. So thanks, Michelle. Thanks to the other people that were participating. And let's hope that in these dark and dangerous times, we can, as vegans, get together and actually synchronize our activism in a bit more of a sort of like a proactive and consolidated way, rather than just sort of like all getting on at each other. I know everybody says this, but okay. Anyway, let's have a go at that, because together, you know what I'm going to say now, don't you? Together, we can stop the war on other animals. Happy holidays. You take care.